James Herriot. James Alfred White, better known by his pen name James Herriot, was a British veterinary surgeon and author. Born in Sunderland, White graduated from Glasgow Veterinary College in 1939, returning to England to become a veterinary surgeon in Yorkshire, where he practiced for almost 50 years. He is best known for writing a series of 8 books set in the 1930s to 1950s Yorkshire Dales about veterinary practice, animals, and their owners, which began with If Only They Could Talk, first published in 1970. Over the decades, the series of books sold some 60 million copies. The franchise based on his writings was very successful. In addition to the books, there have been several television and film adaptations of White's books, including the 1975 film All Creatures Great and Small and the BBC television series of the same name, which ran 90 episodes, and the 2020 series of the same name.
Good morning, children. So let's start our supplementary reader, that is Footprints Without Feet. Their first chapter, and the name of the chapter is A Triumph of Surgery by James Herriot. Here the narrator is James Herriot himself. He is a veterinary surgeon, and he is saying about his experience on a dog named Tricky. So the doctor was called because Tricky seems so ill, and when Harriet saw the dog, he was really shocked to see his appearance. The dog seemed to be so fat and like his body seems to be like a ball having only four legs. Can see only the legs at the four sides. That much fat, and Mrs. Pumphrey told that he was very ill because he didn't seem to be energetic, and so she gave lot of food at intervals in addition to the daily routine. She gave lot of food in between. So even then that dog was not energetic, but Harriet already told that don't give that much food and give lot of exercise. That was the advice given by Harriet earlier, but Mrs. Pumphrey didn't do because she was finding so many reasons for overfeeding and also not giving any exercise. Tricky's mistress provided the dog with lot of luxury, lot of food, and also coats according to the weather condition, everything, all kind of luxury that he was provided. As a result, the dog grew fat and became lazy because of overfeeding. So all this made this dog ill. So by seeing all these things, uh, Harriet expected he can meet the dog, or he can consult the dog um, soon, because that much the condition was not good. So he expected a call soon. At last, Harriet received a call from Mrs. Pumphrey saying that the dog was so ill, and he was uh, he had the vomiting tendency, and he was not at all interested to go out for a walk. So that was what told by Mrs. Pumphrey. Harriet already planned earlier if such thing happened. He wanted to bring out the dog out of the house, and that only make him give better health. So he told Mrs. Pumphrey that the dog should be admitted in the hospital. By hearing this, Mrs. Pumphrey was uh, very much sad. She couldn't tolerate the separation from Tricky. Anyway, the doctor gives strict instruction that the dog should be hospitalized, and he brought the dog out of the car by wrapping in a blanket. That time, Mrs. Pumphrey wailed a lot, cried a lot, and he didn't care about that. Harriet didn't care about that. He took that Tricky to the hospital by denying the wailing of Mrs. Pumphrey, and and also the staff of the staff of Mrs. Pumphrey's. They were also very sad about Tricky. They were running to bring the things of uh, the dog Tricky, like beds, different kinds of beds, dresses, food, everything they were bringing. So that means Tricky was given such a luxurious care, facility and also care, and that's why he became ill like this. Tricky was brought to the surgery, that means to the hospital. There he was surrounded by the dogs in the hospital, and but Tricky didn't show any interest towards them. He was ill. He couldn't move much because of uh, he eating lot of food and other things. So he laid there. Harriet kept this Tricky in a bed, which was which was arranged in a large box, and it was kept near the other dogs. He didn't give any food, but gave lot of water. For 2 days, Tricky didn't show any interest, but the by the end of the second day, he showed little interest towards other dogs, and on the third day, he started whimper when he heard the uh, sound of other dogs. So Harriet opened the door and observed there. As soon as he opened the door, Tricky ran out, and other dogs surrounded him. Joe engulfed him, and also the dogs, uh, you know, when dogs see some other animals or dogs, especially dogs, they started rolling over them, inspect them, and then only they make uh, friendship. So this way, Tricky was inspected, and the dogs ran to the garden, and Tricky also followed them to the garden. And that day, um, the dogs were given food, and they they rushed towards the food plates, and they started eating. They everyone can see the everyone can hear the noise of eating by the dogs, but Ricky waited there. uh, when all other dogs finished their part, Ricky went near the plates and licked the plates. And next day, one more plate was kept for Tricky, because now he didn't, he was okay to he was all right to have the food. From then onwards, his progress was very rapid, and he started eating everything. He started playing with the other dogs, and he seems to be so energetic. And also he became strong. But our Mrs. Pumphrey started always contacting Harriet by asking about Tricky. She rang so several times in a day to know about Tricky, and really Harriet was fed up with that by saying the answers, uh, and he told that uh, Tricky was recovering. So anyway, Mrs. Pumphrey couldn't satisfied with that, but she continued calling Harriet. Mrs. Pumphrey at times inquired whether he was given right food, or whether he was provided with good bed, everything. So, as a reply, Harriet told that uh, this Tricky was recovering, uh, and he used a word convalescing. That the meaning of the word is uh, recovering from an illness. So, by hearing the word convalescing, uh, Mrs. Pumphrey became worried, and she started sending fresh eggs to the hospital. And this doctor, Harriet, didn't give those fresh eggs to Tricky. Instead, he and his staff members ate those two fresh eggs uh, in their with their breakfast. And she also sent wine to improve his blood circulation, and Harriet didn't give that wine to Tricky. Instead, he and his staff members drank that wine along with the food. And she also later she sent brandy. That also was not given to Tricky. Harriet and his staff drank that brandy, and that was a nice time for them, for Harriet and his staff members. So let's stop today and we can continue the remaining in the next class.
Let's go through the story in detail. A Triumph of Surgery. Chapter 1, A Triumph of Surgery. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. Here, when the narrator saw Tricky, Tricky is the name of the dog, and Tricky at that time, he was much shocked. He was much worried about Tricky. Here the narrator is James Herriot, and he is the writer of this story, and he was the veterinary surgeon. Veterinary surgeon means the doctor who give treatment to the animals or birds. So I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. So he was driving the car that time. At a distance, he saw Tricky's mistress, and by seeing the appearance of Tricky, the narrator Harriet, he was much shocked. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. And this here Harriet was giving a description on the dog Tricky, and the dog seems hugely fat, and he seems like a bloated sausage. That means he seems to be swollen or seems too fat, with leg at each corner. That much fat he was, and his eyes, this Tricky's eyes, seems bloodshot. Bloodshot means tinged with blood, means he seems to be tired, and not only bloodshot, it seems to be rheumy. Rheumy means watery, and he was staring straight ahead, and his tongue lolled, means put out from his jaws. In short, he seems to be fatty as well as tired, and not seems to be energetic. Next paragraph. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. Hastened means quickly explained. He was so listless. Listless means lacking energy. Who was so listless? Yeah, Tricky was so listless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extras between meals to build him up. Some malt. Malt means it is the barley or other type of grain, steeped or germinated and dried to make vinegar. That is malt. So here she was giving some malt and cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. Here Mrs. Pumphrey, she is the owner of Home Tricky, and she told quickly to Harriet that the veterinary surgeon that this Tricky was so listless, so, means he was lacking energy, not energetic at all, and because of that, she thought that he was suffering from malnutrition. Malnutrition means not having much nutrition in his body. So he was suffering from malnutrition. So she was giving him some little extras in between. In addition to the meals, she was giving some other foods also at times. What are they? Malt and also cod liver oil. Cod liver oil means the oil made out of codfish liver. And not only that, she was giving a bowl of Horlicks at night in order to get a sleep. So all these things really making this dog more and more fat. As a result, that's the reason why the dog became fat and not energetic at all. Seems sick. That time, Harriet asked, "And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you?" And Harriet asked, he already advised her earlier that she need to cut down. She never give any sweet items to this Tricky. "Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak I had to relent." So relent means become less severe. And he does love green cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. See, when Harriet asked her, "Have you cut down the sweet things?" and that was this Harriet asked her to do, but Mrs. Pumphrey told that this Tricky was very much interested in cream cakes and chocolates and such sweet items. So she couldn't be so more strict. So she gave all these things. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle means take. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. So, the problem was with the dog, and this dog, even though he ate lot of things, he was greedy enough to eat more and more food. He never refused food. That was the problem. He can take a meal at any time, even at night time also, day or night time. And so this Harriet asked, "Are you giving him plenty of exercise?" "Well, he has little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodgkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately." Lumbago means pain in the muscles and joints of the lower back. Here, Harriet asked whether this Tricky was given much exercise. That time, Mrs. Pumphrey told, "No, it was not possible. Only she was giving him some little walks. She was taking Tricky along with her to do some little walks, but couldn't give much exercise because Hodgkin, the gardener, he was suffering from the muscle and joint pain. Because of that, he couldn't able to practice this Tricky for ring throwing. Ring throwing means it is an activity that Tricky had been actively participating in, and with the help from the gardener, he was doing that. But because of the unhealthy condition of this gardener, Tricky couldn't continue the activity because he couldn't give that practice. So he can do only little walks. And next page. I tried to sound severe. Now, I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he's going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Now, Harriet became more uh, strict about the matter of Tricky, and he told Mrs. Pumphrey that if you want this dog be healthy, better you have to cut down the quantity of food given to him and also give him more exercise. Otherwise, he will become ill. And he asked Mrs. Pumphrey to harden her heart and keep the strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Wrung means that is the past tense of ring, and wrung means twisted her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down along the road as if determined to put the new regime's new order or new regime into practice immediately. So, Mrs. Pumphrey, she told she will try her best to follow the new order that was said by whom Miss Harriet, and but she told it will be so difficult, very difficult for her to maintain such an order. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. Means that they were going. Mrs. Pumphrey and Tricky were going. That time Harriet watched, and he found that Tricky was walking unsteadily. Tottering means unsteadily by wearing his woolen coat. Tweed coat means woolen coat. And he had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on drooping in his harness. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. Here, this Tricky had lot of dress like this tweed coat, and tweed coat is preferred for cold weather and raincoat for wet days, and so many dresses are there for this Tricky. Anyway, he went unsteadily and he was bending because of his harness on his body. Harness means set of straps or fittings that was fastened in his body, and he was very much struggling to walk properly. So Harriet thought that he will soon hear something from Mrs. Pumphrey because the condition of the dog was not very nice. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Distraught means upset. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug. Rug means floor mat. Panting. Panting means breathing with short, quick breaths. And didn't want to go for walks. Didn't want to do anything. So, Harriet expected a call from Mrs. Pumphrey, and it came within a few days. And what was the thing said by Mrs. Pumphrey? Mrs. Pumphrey told that She was very upset. She was distraught and she was very upset. And she told that Ricky would not eat anything. And not only that, he refused even his favorite dishes. And he seems to be having vomiting tendency. And he was simply lying on the rug or the floor mat and panting, means breathing with short and quick breaths. He didn't going out. He didn't go out for walks, and he didn't want to do anything. So I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Ricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. Fortnight means 2 weeks or 14 days. So by hearing this, he already made a plan. Harriet already made a plan. But the only one way to make his condition better, Tricky's condition better, is to bring him out of the house for a period of time. So he suggested Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky should be hospitalized for about a fortnight, about 2 weeks or about 14 days, to kept under the observation. The poor lady almost swooned. Swooned means fainted. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. By hearing this news that Tricky should be hospitalized for about a fortnight, the lady became almost fainted, and she thought that Tricky couldn't live if he didn't see her every day. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him out without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. So Harriet thought that he never wait for another moment, because sometimes Mrs. Pumphrey may change her mind. So he took immediate action. He ignored the wailings. Wailing is sound expressing grief. He ignored the wailings of Mrs. Pumphrey, and he marched out to the car carrying that little dog, Ricky, wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out, bringing his daybed, his nightbed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff means things, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. See, when Harriet brought the little dog out, wrapped in a blanket, that time the whole staff in the house and the maids, they rushed in, and they brought out so many things belonging to Tricky: the daybed, his nightbed, his favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Separate bowls were kept for him, and they thought that his car wouldn't hold all this stuff. And anyways, he started to drive away, and when he moved, that time Mrs. Pumphrey, with a cry, she threw an armful of little coats through the window. And when he looked through the mirror, he found all the people in that house, they were crying. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Poor old lad, I said. You haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. So, when he went out of the compound, uh, he glanced at the poor, pathetic, or miserable little animal, and he was gasping, means difficult. He was breathing difficultly, and that time he patted the dog's head, and Tricky tried to wag his tail, but it was not. He couldn't do that. That time he patted his head and told, "Oh, poor old lad." Lad means boy. I can cure you. At the surgery, the household dog surged round me. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes and, when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. So he reached his hospital. That time, all other household dogs, they surrounded him, and Tricky looked down at the noisy pack, and he was not energetic. He seems to be so dull, and he lay motionless on the carpet. And other dogs, they sniffed round him, they smelled him for a few seconds. Then they thought that he was an uninteresting object, so they ignored him. I made up a bed for him in a warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days, I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings, and on the third, he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. So, the narrator, he made a bed for him, for this Tricky, where in a warm, loose box, and he kept the box where the other dogs slept. And for 2 days, he observed Tricky, and he didn't give any food to him, but he gave lot of or plenty of water. And at the end of the second day, Tricky started to show some interest in his surroundings, and third day he began to whimper. Whimper means to make feeble sounds when he heard the dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe. Engulfed means surrounded by Joe, the greyhound. Greyhound, that is the one special race of dog. Engulfed by Joe, the greyhound, and his friends. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. So, third day, when he opened the door, Tricky ran out, and he was surrounded by Joe and other dogs. And after rolling him over, after rolling this Tricky over, and they thoroughly inspected this dog by smelling, and also then the dogs ran off to the garden, and Tricky also followed them. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. I watched while Tristan sloped the food into the bowls. There was the usual headlong rush, followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. So that particular day, late in the evening, that time he saw the so Tristan, he gave the food to the dogs, and there was the usual rush, and there he can hear the high speed eating sound, and every dog, they knew that if he fell behind the others, he will he will not win the competition. What competition? Eating the food. When they had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. So, and all other dogs finished their eating. Tricky went near the shining bowls, and he licked inside one or two bowls, and he next day he got another bowl. From then on, his progress was rapid. Rapid means fast. He had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. Scrimmages means fight. He discovered the joys of being bowled over, tramped down, and squashed every few minutes. He became an accepted member of the gang. Which gang? Gang of dogs. An unlikely, silky little object among the shaggy crew, fighting like a tiger for his share at mealtimes and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. He had never had such a time in his life. So that particular day onwards, there was a rapid progress in the health and life of this Tricky. He didn't get any medicinal treatment, but instead he was allowed to mingle freely with other dogs. So he enjoyed all sorts of the group enjoyment in the group. He fought with them, he played with them, he ran with them, and also he shared his he fought like a tiger for his share at meal times, and also he hunted rats in the old hen house at night. Anyway, he enjoyed the that life very much, because he never gets such a sort of life before or after. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. So, Mrs. Pumphrey, she was very anxious about the little dog Tricky. So, she remained anxiously hovered, means remained anxiously in the background, always ringing at least a dozen times by asking about the latest bulletins, means latest news regarding Tricky. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convalescing rapidly. Here he dodged, he avoided the questions of Mrs. Pumphrey about whether whether the questions of Tricky were turned regularly, or whether he was wearing the correct coat according to the weather. But Harriet didn't give any answer to such inquiries. Only he told that this Tricky was convalescing rapidly, recovering rapidly. The word convalescing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. So, by hearing the word convalescing, she thought that this Tricky was suffered from severe disease. So, Mrs. Pumphrey wanted to build up his health again. So, she sent lot of fresh eggs, and Harriet didn't give those fresh eggs to Tricky. Instead, he and his partners had 2 eggs each for breakfast. And later, bottles of wine arrived, and that also they drank. Mrs. Pumphrey sent those wines in order to enrich Tricky's blood. So, this Harriet and his partners had wonderful time during that by having those eggs as well as wine. We could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. There were days of deep content, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing leisureusly round the fire with the brandy. So then she sent the next one, that is brandy, and all this fresh eggs they ate during breakfast. They drank the wine during midday, and they had the brandy during supper time. So anyway, the whole members of the hospital, they had wonderful time. So read up to this and study well, and if you have any doubt, ask me. Meanings. Sausage means finely minced meat stuffed into long cylindrical cases and divided into small lengths by twisting or tying. Rumi means a watery discharge from a mucous membrane, especially of the nose or eyes. Listless means lacking energy and enthusiasm. Lumbago means muscular pain in the lower part of the back, that is lumbar region. Regime means prescribed course of exercise and diet. Next one is distraught. Distraught means extremely worried. Surgery means a place where a doctor, a dentist, or a veterinary surgeon treats patients. Scrimmage means rough or confused struggle. Convalescing means recovering from an illness. Lathe means flexible. Write these meanings in your notebook and study. Today's activity is, you should do assessment 10 given in the description box.